In 1989, a soft drink company took delivery of 17 Soviet submarines, plus a cruiser, a frigate, and a destroyer. This is not a meme. It was reported in the papers at the time, and it actually happened. For one strange moment, the company that sold you cola in a red, white, and blue can held a stack of Soviet military hardware in its own name. You have probably heard the punchline, that this briefly made Pepsi the 6th largest navy on Earth. Hold that line, because it is not quite true, and the real story is somehow better. So how does a cola company end up with a fleet of submarines? To understand it, rewind 30 years, to a Moscow trade fair in 1959. The Cold War is on. An American exhibition opens in Sokolniki Park, and a young Pepsi executive named Donald Kendall has one job: get a cup of Pepsi into the hand of Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. With a nudge from Vice President Richard Nixon, he does exactly that. Cameras catch Khrushchev sipping an American cola and looking like he enjoys it. That single photo is marketing gold. Kendall now has proof the leader of the Soviet Union drinks Pepsi. The only problem? Selling into a country sealed off from the West would take him another 13 years. Kendall did not give up. He lobbied for over a decade, and in 1972, he pulled it off. Pepsi became the first American consumer product made and sold inside the Soviet Union. And he grabbed something sweeter: exclusivity. Coca-Cola, the great rival, was locked out of the Soviet market for years. Pepsi had cracked the one door every Western brand wanted open. But there was a catch. The Soviet ruble was worthless outside the Soviet Union. Nobody would trade for it. So Pepsi had sold a whole country its cola, with no normal way to get paid. Time to get creative. The solution was barter. No cash, just a swap. Pepsi shipped its secret syrup east and took payment in the one thing the Soviets had in abundance: vodka. Stolichnaya, with exclusive rights to sell it across the United States. So picture it. Cola flows east, vodka flows west, and everyone is happy. For most of a decade, a soda company quietly ran on liquor money. Strange, funny, and completely functional. Until the arithmetic started to wobble. Here is the wobble. By the late 1980s, Pepsi's Soviet business had exploded. More than 20 bottling plants, dozens more planned, pouring out roughly 1 billion servings a year. But Americans could only drink so much vodka. The liquor side of the trade simply could not keep pace with all that cola. Pepsi needed a new way to get paid. And the Soviet Union, deep into perestroika and desperate for hard currency, went rummaging through its cupboards for anything of value to trade. What did it find? Its own military. And so we reached the deal that made the legend. In spring 1989, a Pepsi-linked joint venture, working with a Norwegian shipping partner, took control of a slice of the aging Soviet fleet. 17 submarines, 1 cruiser, 1 frigate, 1 destroyer. Old, decommissioned, bound for retirement, but real warships all the same, handed over as payment for soft drinks. The price on those submarines? About $150,000 each. Less than a small apartment for a Soviet submarine. One honest note. This was widely reported at the time by the New York Times and the Associated Press, but it rests on a thin slice of 1989 press. So we will tell you what was reported and no more. So Pepsi owned a fleet of Soviet submarines. Did it start a navy? Not for 1 second. Pepsi never crewed a ship, never sailed a ship, never fired a thing. The vessels were rusting scrap, and Pepsi flipped the whole lot straight to that Norwegian firm to be broken up for metal. Pepsi was not an admiral. It was a middleman running the strangest scrap iron trade of the Cold War. But the story was too good, and Kendall knew it. He reportedly turned to Brent Scowcroft, the national security advisor at the White House, and joked, We are disarming the Soviet Union faster than you are. Now, do not confuse that with what came next. Because a year later, in April 1990, Pepsi signed something far bigger. The largest commercial deal ever struck between an American company and the Soviet Union. Reported at more than $3 billion over roughly a decade. New Pepsi plants, Pizza Hut restaurants opening in Moscow, and the wild part, a commitment for Soviet shipyards to build at least 10 oil tankers and freighters for Pepsi to sell or lease on the open market. A soda company was now, on paper, in the commercial shipping business. The little scrap ship deal was pocket change beside this one. Two completely separate deals, and almost every retelling smashes them into one. And then the whole thing hit an iceberg nobody saw coming. On December 25, 1991, the Soviet Union did something no contract had planned for. It ceased to exist. The country that signed the deal was gone, and the shipyard meant to build Pepsi's tankers now sat inside a brand new independent country, Ukraine, whose government had its own ideas about that revenue. The $3 billion deal did not collapse so much as evaporate, along with the nation that signed it. Pepsi was left holding a contract with a country no longer on the map. And while Pepsi untangled a fortune from a country that no longer existed, guess who strolled in? Coca-Cola. The rival Pepsi had kept locked out for nearly 20 years. Coke walked into the chaos of the new Russia, spent aggressively, and within a few years overtook the lead Pepsi had spent 3 decades building. Pepsi had won the Cold War soda race by a mile. Then the finish line, and the whole country it was drawn in, simply moved. Which brings us back to that punchline from the start. Did Pepsi really have the 6th largest navy on Earth? No, not close. That line is a great joke, and it began as exactly that, a witty aside in the press, not a ranking from any defense analyst. 17 decommissioned submarines and 3 tired surface ships would not have cracked the top 25 navies anywhere. These were not fighting ships. They were rusting hulls, sold for scrap, passing through Pepsi's hands on the way to a wrecking yard. Pepsi never commanded a navy. It ran a bizarre, one-time trade in Soviet scrap metal and told a joke about it. And honestly, that true story is far stranger than the myth it became. So that is the real tale. A photo of a Soviet leader sipping cola turned into an empire, paid for in vodka, then submarines, then oil tankers, all because a currency was worthless and one executive refused to quit. Pepsi never wanted a war fleet. It wanted a market that was sealed shut, and it would take payment in almost anything to reach it. It just happened that almost anything included the Soviet military. So here is my question for you. If cracking a new market meant taking your payment in submarines, would you sign or walk away? Tell me in the comments, and which company should we open up next? Subscribe, and we will keep opening the tapes the giants would rather keep shut. This was the Industry Tapes.